Redditors who've died and been resuscitated. What was your experience? Not sure if this counts. I've posted this before. When I was a kid I nearly drowned. It was pretty simple really. I just remember looking up at the bright lights from the bottom of the pool and thinking I'm gonna die. It was strangely calm, and now that I think about it, those bright lights may or may not have been from physical lighting. Next thing I knew I was puking water out of my lungs on the side of the pool. I wouldn't really call it traumatic. I actually think it's kinda cool that everything felt so calm. Around 15 years ago my uncle dropped dead of a heart attack. Fortunately for him, he was in the waiting room of his local GP clinic when it happened. They had a defibrillator and several doctors and managed to get him back after a few minutes. I have begged him to tell me what happened, but he flatly refuses. He won't tell anyone. Before that day he was a regular late middle-aged guy, even went to church regularly. After that day he stopped going to church and started drinking hard. These days he is an alcoholic with the memory span of a goldfish. He doesn't even remember who I am. My mother-in-law was very ill and had to have surgery. I cannot remember exactly what for as this was about 15 years ago. After her surgery, when she was in recovery, the doctors told us that her heart had stopped for a couple of minutes, but they were able to bring her back. My father-in-law asked the doctor not to mention it to her until she was feeling stronger, as he was worried the news would set her recovery back. The next day I went to visit her, and she told me that she was sure she had died whilst they were operating on her as she watched them do the surgery and had a conversation with her deceased father. I was dying due to a pregnancy complication and managed to come back after being a coma for 3 days after my son was born. I didn't see any bright lights or anything. What I did experience though was a feeling of calmness and no pain. I had at least 5 medical staff around my hospital bed discussing how to treat me, and I felt like I could hear and answer each one of them so clearly. I was told that I was only given minutes to live at that point. Not me but my grandfather quite recently. He is at a ripe old age, but still quite healthy, still bikes to the store every day etc. Recently he had to undergo an open heart operation, and during the aftercare of that operation there were complications. His bladder got infected which caused blood poisoning. When his condition deteriorated we went to the hospital, where the doctors told us that half a day later would have been too late. For 3 days, he was mostly sleeping, and he says he has no memories of those 3 days. It's as if he never existed. He did dream. He told us he walked in his old house and saw his mother doing dishes or something. When his mother saw my grandfather, she told him, "What are you doing here? You are not supposed to be here yet." And then he woke up. I was 17. My dad died 2 years earlier. I was having a diffuse pulmonary hemorrhage and I had to be put under for a bowel. While I was under, I had a dream that I was standing in a hallway at the hospital and I was on my way out the door. Then I heard my dad's voice say, "No, don't go that way," and I turned around to see him, and I woke up in the OR. They told me that I had flatlined during the procedure, but they were able to get me back quickly. I like to think my dad saved my life that day. I was 7 years old and was in a head-on collision with a semi-truck in a Jeep. My mother died on impact. It broke my neck and ejected me from the Jeep along with numerous other injuries. I went into an out-of-body experience and spoke with a presence or something on the other side, and it told me I wasn't done yet, and I woke up a month later from a coma with that as the last thing I remember before going dark. I had a head injury with 7 fractures on my skull. After it happened, thrown off a moving car, I was lying on the pavement and I hear a friend say, "She's fine," in my name. I tried to get up, but I couldn't move, and then I found myself above myself and looking down at my body on the ground. I saw my friend standing there. Then I was back in my body and I got up and I ended up in a coma in intensive care for 7 days. I distinctly remember my out-of-body experience after the accident. I too nearly drowned when I was 5 years old. I remember it still as clear as day. I fell in and began to panic and tried to scream and struggle. Then everything went calm and quiet and slowed right down. I remember thinking I'm about to die now, but it was calm and I felt okay about it. No lights or seeing anything special, just a divine calm and a feeling of being okay. Sickeningly bright lights, awful pain, felt wind, or what I can describe as wind IDK, voices, nauseating spinning. This to sum up the experience in a few words. I wrote a story on my experience and called it The Meadow because I remember a meadow. I've had people try to question my experiences or make sense of them, so let me throw this out there. I have no effing idea what happened. If it was hallucinations, a religious experience or what, I was dead. I don't know details. I know what I experienced while I was technically dead. I don't know the why, what or where. I was in the hospital laying on my side on the bed. I was warm. The perfect temperature. Was the most comfortable I'd ever been. The noises around the hospital faded pretty quickly. I kept thinking, wow, this is going to be the best nap. Everything was pitch black and nothing hurt anymore. Pretty sure if I'd taken that nap I wasn't going to come back because my thoughts were turning into nothing. Death isn't scary, but I've read, if you are full of regret, that it's what you think about. So just don't be a shithead and enjoy your nap, I guess. Well, I've seen hallucinations prior to falling in coma, or maybe I was already in that stage. I remember seeing my living room in different dimensions with all the furniture being on the walls and ceiling. Then the bright light hit through the windows. It was so bright that I can't even describe it. After that it was all darkness, and I don't remember anything until I woke up in hospital. Later I was told that I had 43°C temperature and I was in coma for 19 hours. This happened to me at the age of 6. Not speaking from my own experience, but my grandmother described it to me in great detail. She all of a sudden, when her heart stopped, just felt an extremely out-of-body experience where she kept falling into an endless void with strong winds for an extremely long undetermined amount of time. When she'd been resuscitated, it felt like gravity in the void suddenly reversed itself and got stronger by a large amplifier, and she was pulled back to herself. During that entire time she didn't feel anything in the void except darkness. She couldn't see, but she could hear, and she also heard voices from afar. It was really interesting hearing her talk about this, even if it's just the mind's creativity making up things. I'm a recovering heroin addict. My mom took me in towards the end of my struggle. I was homeless and sleeping in cemeteries. I managed to get a couple weeks clean, but I relapsed. My mom is epileptic and has a service dog. Her dog, Dano, Black Lab, found me overdosed in the middle of the night. Dano alerted my mom, who was trained to administer Narcan. She hit me with it to no avail. It was expired. She then called the 911. By this time she said I was cold and losing color. Ever see an ambulance just parked in a parking lot waiting for a call? Well, a couple houses down from my mom's house was a church. There just happened to be an ambulance in that parking lot. They got to me less than a minute later, administered 2 more doses of Narcan, and hit me with those paddles. I woke up severely confused, so cold, and just wired a bit differently. Grateful to still be here. I'll be celebrating 7 years of a new lease on life this October. Blessed. My mom was in a single car accident. Right after she remembers someone looking in the car window telling her she'd be okay, she died. She said she saw a horrible place where there were demons and people. She saw her grandmother there, but my mom kept going. I don't know what it means either. Then she was in a different place. Not heaven, but she couldn't describe it. She saw her father, who asked her, "What in the Sam Hill are you doing here?" She kept going and came to a panel and Jesus was there. She said he's really funny. Then boom, she's back in her body in the hospital. Before the wreck she was going through hard times, and while she was driving she said out loud, "God, if you're there, prove it." Before the wreck she sort of believed, but after the wreck she really believed. Also, one of the people that found her first was her pastor's son. He said he had the urge to just go driving around that night, and he lived in the next town over, so it was odd for him to be out in her area. My dad had a heart attack and said there was nothing but blackness. Dad was an atheist. Now I'm really confused. I have 2 stories from people I've talked to that have died and come back. First story, I remember my 5th grade teacher recalling the story of the time in his life when he had blood cancer, don't remember which type, and he became gravely ill. His sister brought her children over to see him, but he never agreed to it because he just had his immune system destroyed to prepare him for a bone marrow transplant. Anyways, the 3 kids come in the room, some of them sneezing, wiping their snot on his sheets, and wouldn't you know it, He got sick. He rapidly declined, and they brought him to the hospital where they performed some sort of surgery to stabilize him. During surgery he flatlined, had absolutely no pulse. He was dead, and the next thing he knew, he was floating above the surgeons, nurses, and technicians. He could see everything they were doing, heard what they were saying. He described the experience as surreal, but peaceful, with full cognitive ability. He told the story over the course of 20 minutes, but that's the cliff notes. Second story, I used to work at a car dealership, and I had an Italian man and his wife come in to buy a car. When we got to the paperwork, we somehow started talking about the afterlife, religion, and all the things you shouldn't talk about in sales lol. Anyways, this guy has been in multiple accidents, has died multiple times, and had an experience every time he died. The most memorable to me was his second time dying. He gets into a car accident, gets rushed into surgery and dies on the table. He's looking down on himself, and the team working to revive him. He notices the music playing in the room, the doctor's bald spot, and hears everything they are talking about. When they bring him back to life and stabilize him, the doctor comes to see him. He tells the doctor, I was watching you when I was dead on the table. The doctor brushed it off, but my customer told him, I'll prove it. When I was dead the speakers were playing Metallica, and I saw you have a bald spot on the top of your head. The doctor was tall and the bald spot was at the back of his head. Nothing my customer could see when talking to him. The doctor was shocked when he identified the music and his bald spot. Turns out the doctor was going through a religious crisis and was also contemplating quitting his program. My customer ended up reaffirming his belief in God and convinced him to continue working as a doctor. It was a heartwarming story. I can't remember his name, but he wrote a book about it. I can't find it anywhere. I think it was called My Father and Me, with a photo of a father and son on the front of the book. He recounted his relationship with his father and the multiple times he died in the book. I wish I could find it. Sorry for going off on a tangent at the end.